Claire Wilson was about to start her first day seeing patients. Fresh from completing her internship, she had just opened her own psychiatric practice in collaboration with another psychiatrist, Paul Ramsey. Building a patient base was just beginning after 3 months of practice. Then came the great shift. Claire was luckier than most affected by it. 92% of the human population found themselves in different bodies, with over 50% switching sexes. Some ended up far from where they started, but many simply swapped with someone nearby. It was random and inexplicable. People found themselves in bodies of different sexes, races, ages, chaotic and unsettling. The shift led to suicides and fatal accidents, a tragic aftermath of this unexplained phenomenon. Before the shift, Claire was 5 feet 7 inches, around 140 pounds, with blonde hair and blue eyes. She had a well-proportioned figure, neither too small nor too large, and was just a week shy of her 29th birthday when it happened. That afternoon, Claire was wrapping up at the office, having just seen her last patient. Her receptionist was tidying up, and Claire had stepped out of her private bathroom when a sudden unease overcame her. Then, the shift occurred. Claire woke up to find herself seated behind her desk, but in Carmen's body, her own receptionist. Shocked, she heard a scream from her office. Unable to open the locked door, Claire retrieved an emergency key from Carmen's desk. Inside, she found the office and bathroom empty, except for an open window. Looking down, she saw her former body, 4 stories below on the pavement. Carmen had jumped to her death. Overwhelmed, Claire fainted. When Claire regained consciousness, she was at a loss. Grabbing her purse and keys, she hurried out of the office building into chaos, people screaming, cars wrecked, bodies scattered on the streets. She made a beeline for her BMW and drove off, bewildered at finding herself in Carmen's body, a Puerto Rican woman, 5 feet 5 inches and 150 pounds, with dark brown hair, dark eyes, and a generous figure. Claire had often thought Carmen could look good with a bit of weight loss. She herself was a committed lesbian with a strong distaste for men, finding them patronizing and overly focused on their anatomy. Claire's live-in girlfriend, Florence, ran a pediatric medical practice, and Claire decided to drive there. What should have been a 15-minute drive took 45, navigating around wrecked cars and disoriented people filling the roads. On the way, Carmen tuned into a news radio station where a female announcer with a male name spoke of a supernatural event later termed the Great Shift, affecting people worldwide. Arriving at Florence's office building, Claire encountered even more chaos than at her own office. Adults and small children wandered the lot, some crying out for their parents. Claire carefully made her way through the crowd, encountering a young woman who tearfully asked for her mommy. Feeling helpless, Claire moved on, realizing that many adults and children had been swapped. Inside the office, the scene was no less unsettling. Claire walked into the doctor's office without being stopped, searching for Florence. In some patient rooms, scenes mirrored those outside. Finally, Claire found Florence on the floor of one room, crying. A young Hispanic woman held a newborn, speaking rapidly in Spanish that Claire struggled to understand. "I don't speak Spanish," Claire replied, shaken. The woman switched to broken English, expressing concern for her baby's health and confusion about what was happening. Claire suddenly feared that Florence might now be this woman's infant. Overwhelmed by the thought, Claire fled the building and drove home, the normally 30-minute journey taking well over an hour, unsure of what else to do. Claire spent the following days at home, clinging to hope that Florence might return, though each passing day made it seem less likely. Eventually, Claire accepted that Florence was likely gone for good, mourning both her loss and her own altered circumstances. Television reports focused on the inexplicable phenomenon dubbed the Great Shift, linked vaguely to a large explosion in the American Southwest just before the event. Scientists offered theories, but no solutions, urging calm and a return to normalcy. Claire considered herself fortunate, still a woman, nearly the same age, though now a different race. She resolved to resume her life as best she could. Others hadn't been as lucky, finding themselves in bodies much older or younger than their own. Watching interviews of those affected and psychiatrists offering advice, Claire decided to offer her own services. Calling a friend at the local CBS affiliate, Claire convinced Shannon, who had swapped with a male staffer, to let her appear on air. For days, Claire provided counsel to other victims of the Great Shift, drawing attention from a local hospital interested in establishing support groups. 2 weeks after the shift, Claire sat in her office preparing for her first support group meeting. Her receptionist, an 11-year-old boy named Angela, had directed the group to the conference room next door, as it was too large for Claire's office. This particular session focused on men now in women's bodies. Chuckling softly at some of the patient information she reviewed, Claire appreciated the irony of these men experiencing life from a different perspective. Yet, she remained committed to professionalism and helping them adjust to their new realities. Rising from her desk, Claire headed towards the conference room. When Claire entered the conference room, she found 8 women and girls seated around the table, spanning from a 3-year-old to a woman in her mid-70s. Claire took a seat at the far end of the rectangular table and began by introducing herself. "Hello, my name is Dr. Claire Wilson, and welcome to the Male to Female Shift Support Group. Like you, I've been affected by the Great Shift," Claire explained, briefly sharing about herself. She mentioned her new body's strict diet, having lost 7 pounds and aiming to shed another 15. However, she kept her sexual orientation private, knowing her patients came for therapy, not personal details. "I think it would be beneficial if we introduce ourselves," Claire suggested. "Tell us about your lives before and after the shift, how you're adjusting, and any challenges you're facing." She then turned to the young woman on her left, asking if she'd like to start. "Hi, my name is Imiko, or Tom," the woman began, appearing in her mid-20s and of Japanese descent. "I used to be Tom before the shift. I swapped bodies with my girlfriend, Imiko. Now she's in my old body." Imiko/Tom seemed relatively unaffected by the change. "How have things been for you since the shift?" Claire inquired. "Okay. Imiko and I are still together, and we've carried on like nothing's different," Imiko/Tom replied. "But this body is a stark contrast to my old one. I used to be 6 feet 5 inches and muscular, now I'm barely 5 and weaker. It's been an adjustment." "You seem to be adapting well," Claire remarked. "I don't know," Imiko/Tom continued. "Imiko and I have been intimate in our new bodies. She thinks I should have had my period by now." As she spoke, Imiko/Tom grew visibly anxious. "I think I might be pregnant. I didn't feel well this morning, and Imiko made me an appointment at a women's clinic tomorrow for a blood test. I'm scared." Claire found herself amused by the situation but maintained her professional demeanor. "Make sure to keep that appointment. If you are pregnant, it's crucial to take good care of yourself," Claire advised before asking if Imiko/Tom wanted to share more. She declined, prompting Claire to turn to the next woman at the table to speak. Next to Imiko sat an elderly woman in her 70s who had been assisted to the meeting by a nurse positioned quietly against the back wall. The elderly woman struggled to speak. "My name is Tom, or Gretchen now," she began, recounting how she had been flying home from a business trip when the shift occurred. "I was waiting in baggage claim, and then suddenly, this." According to Keith/Gretchen's paperwork, the shift had transported her from the airport to a nursing home nearly 5 miles away, a long-distance shift, uncommon but not unheard of during the Great Shift's chaos. The elderly woman gestured to herself, visibly frail and struggling. Claire couldn't help but feel compassion for this person who had been so dramatically displaced by the shift, robbed of their former life. "I was 34 years old, and now I'm this," the elderly woman continued, her distress evident. She appeared on the verge of becoming very unwell when the nurse intervened, administering medication and a glass of water to calm her down. After a few moments, Keith/Gretchen seemed more composed. "Perhaps we should let Tom speak again when she's feeling better," Claire suggested, then turned her attention to the young girl seated next to the elderly woman. The little girl spoke up, around 3 years old, with long blonde hair down her back. My name is David, or Brittany now, she said tearfully. I was shifted with my great-granddaughter Brittany when it happened. I was an 81-year-old man, in a nursing home being visited by my grandson, his wife, and my great-granddaughter. Mentioning Brittany made the little girl cry even harder. The teenage girl on her left tried to comfort her by holding her hand. Do you want to share anything else? Claire asked, her sympathy evident. I don't want to be Brittany. Brittany died of a heart attack right after we shifted. I was the old man, I should be the one who's gone, the young girl wailed. I didn't mean for this to happen to her. It's not your fault, Claire reassured her gently. You have to accept what's happened. It's difficult for all of us. I just feel so guilty. Brittany had her whole life ahead, and I was an old man, the girl said, beginning to calm down. We're all here to support you, Claire said kindly. She asked if David/Brittany wanted to say more, but she declined. It was still an introductory session, and Claire planned to give her patients time to discuss their concerns about their new genders after introductions. You two came in together. Maybe it's best if you introduce yourselves, Claire suggested, noticing a woman in her mid-30s seated next to a preteen girl. The older woman had a baby seat beside her with a small infant girl inside. The young girl spoke up. My name is Richard or now Michelle, and the girl nodded to the woman next to her, and this is my son James or Jimmy or oh heck she is in the body of my wife Rachel. I am in the body of my daughter. Jimmy/Rachel looked very uncomfortable and seemed to prefer if his dad did the talking. How are both of you adjusting? Claire asked. It was apparent it was not going too well. Well, Jimmy took the body of his mother. The young lady was having a hard time talking about this. Seems my wife is now our baby girl. Rachel gave birth to Tiffany just a month ago. I became our other daughter Michelle. Now Michelle is me. Richard/Michelle stopped for a moment. Why did this happen to us? It was more of a comment than a question. Jimmy/Rachel finally spoke up. I don't want to be a mommy. A teenage girl seated directly next to Claire said, at least you aren't a teenage girl with all these horny teenage boys trying to get in your pants. When Claire heard what Richard/Michelle said about his wife, Claire felt bad for a moment. She thought about her Florence and how she was doing as an infant girl now. Claire turned to the teenage girl. We are all here to help one another. This is not easy for anyone. I just hate whining. The teenage girl said back. Claire asserted herself to take control back of the meeting. Jimmy, you are a mother now, and that infant needs certain things a mother can only do for an infant. I know. I just hate it when she sucks my chest, Jimmy/Rachel said. Claire tried to explain a little. A baby eventually will not need to be fed. Till then, you will have to do the best. It's hard, but I think you will be fine. The father spoke up. Jimmy will be going to a support group tonight for the new mothers too. Yes, that sounds like a good idea. Claire said, then asked if either Jimmy/Rachel or Richard/Michelle wished to say something else. They said no. Well, I might as well start, said an approximately 30-year-old woman. She was in the late stages of her own pregnancy, obviously. My name is Paul, and he pointed to a man seated against the wall, and that is my wife Kathy. We were at a Lamaze class when the shift happened. Claire chuckled to herself, another man who was finding out how tough it was for women. Kathy looked so big that she might go into labor before the meeting ended. How are you two handling life now? Okay, for the most part. My due date is day after tomorrow. I wish this would just end so Kathy and me can go on. We still love one another. The woman said. His wife was proudly smiling in his seat too. Jimmy/Rachel's baby had started to cry. Dad, what am I supposed to do? Son, I think it's feeding time. Richard/Michelle said. I know, but I hate this. Jimmy/Rachel picked up the crying baby girl and without paying attention to the other people in the room undid a button on her blouse and exposed her chest. The baby immediately started to enjoy human milk. Geez, how can you say things are okay? The teenage girl was speaking again. You are pregnant. Claire noticed that Keith/Gretchen had fallen asleep. No use in waking her, she thought. She did not like people interrupting other patients. She always wanted to keep group meetings orderly. Well, me and Kathy have just decided to accept what has happened. Nothing can change what I am now. Between me and Kathy, I will make it through this. The pregnant woman said. This is our first child, we are still very excited. Most of the women at the table congratulated Paul and Kathy. Claire turned to the young African-American woman seated next to Paul/Kathy. Maybe you should let her talk first. The African-American woman said. I am a little shy. Okay. Claire said and prompted the teenage girl next to her to talk. My name is Rick, I was home from college for the summer. I was the star linebacker for my college football team, I was considered a top pro prospect. Now I am AF. Girl! Rick yelled. The girl was definitely attractive, even beautiful, and was well endowed at what was a still young age. Claire gave the teenage girl a disdainful look, she did not like cursing in her group meetings. I know it's not easy, but I prefer if you didn't curse. You would curse too if you were a guy, and now you were a teenage girl with a huge pair of hooters and a female reproductive organ, Rick exclaimed. Every horny teenage boy is hitting on me and my period started yesterday. Claire suppressed a smile. The last comment she found so funny, the poor thing was finding out about a woman's monthly cycle and finding out it wasn't such a joke. Also, he was finding out that it was not much fun being the center of attraction as a woman with men always treating you like a plaything. Claire went on. Who did you trade places with? Carla, the girl next door. Paul/Carla had calmed down a little. Carla keeps asking me for a date, I hate it. Tom/Emiko spoke up from across the table. Did you or are you going to go out with her? Rick/Carla lowered their head and murmured, I don't know. Maybe. Claire interjected, Rick, we're all in this together. We can support each other. Coming to this meeting shows you want help. Rick/Carla briefly smiled. I know. Thank you. This is just so difficult. Claire then turned to the last person in the room. Would you like to introduce yourself? The woman was attractive, African American, with long curly brown hair. Claire noticed her ample chest, something she always appreciated. Hi, I'm Eric, or now Ebony, the woman said. I was a white truck driver before the shift. I was watching dancers at a bar when it happened, and I swapped bodies with one of them. Ebony seemed completely unfazed by her new body and exuded confidence. How are you feeling now? Claire inquired. She noticed that Keith/Gretchen's nurse had risen to attend to the elderly woman. Well, I actually prefer it now. When the shift happened, I went back home with my old body, but I ditched him 2 days later. Men can be so disappointing in bed, Ebony remarked. Currently, I'm living with another dancer named Aisha. She was one of the unaffected ones. Aisha and I, Ebony hesitated briefly before continuing, we're together. We're gay. We've been living as a couple. Claire suppressed a smile. It was comforting to see that at least one former man understood that love between two women was profound. Her reverie was interrupted when she noticed the nurse's concerned expression, the one caring for Keith/Gretchen. Doctor, I think she's passed away, the nurse said solemnly. Claire immediately got up, checked the woman's pulse, and then her carotid artery. Tom, please go outside and ask my receptionist to call 911, Claire instructed. Tom/Emiko hurried out of the room. Ladies, I'm afraid we'll have to postpone the rest of the meeting. Please ensure my receptionist has your phone numbers on your way out. We'll reconvene next Monday, same time. Claire remained composed. After everyone else had left, only the nurse and she remained. Dr. Wilson had never experienced a patient's death before. Then again, many things had changed after the Great Shift. Claire knew she would have plenty of patients to care for from now on.